GridTrack is the system, the group of functionalities that is all around tracking users, hence GridTrack. And the first screen, so at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a bunch of kind of the main sets of icons around the Grit app, and one of those is GridTrack. Clicking on GridTrack, and then the user's screen will pop up. If it does not, then in the top right corner, there is a hamburger menu, and it shows some of the other screens that relate to GridTrack functionality. So starting with users, this is the list of all of the users that have been added into Grit. And this can happen either through adding of a new user within this interface, or adding of a new user within the sign-on interface, or users that have been imported into the system via the CSV import process. The list of users, there's an icon that is associated with each of them. Some of them look like just a standard user type icon, and some of them have a user with a king's crown on them, and those are users that are set as admins. Another aspect to this is users that have a green icon are users that are currently signed into the system, and those will always be at the top of this list. So let's go into one of these users. Let's choose this user here, Lizzie Freedom. And during the import process, one of the things that can be imported is a user's photo. This can only be added when you're using import through CSV, which can point to an image that Grit will download during the import process, or it can be a base64 encoded value that's imported as the image. The first set of fields is referred to as the profile. So first name, last name, PIN number, email address, password, and some fields that are used to identify this user uniquely within the Grit system. The external proximity card number, this gets pulled in during an import, which allows for a school or an organization to send Grit the RFID card number that comes from their student ID. And then there's another ID card number that is a permanent Grit card that can be assigned to a user. Below this is we have set up a mobile Grit cards that can be assigned to users. A user can scan this QR code, or you can click on email mobile cards and it will send an email to this user based with the email address that's specified on their profile. In addition, we have the current list of tools that this user has access to, and the demographics that have been configured in the system for this particular user. Demographics can either be pushed in during a data import, or they can be set up and manually configured within Grit. Because all of these fields are disabled, that means that all of these demographics are pushed into the system via that data import. Some notes about a user. This could be interactions that a user has with a shop manager that we want to make sure that are captured. Things that, such as this user needs to talk to the shop manager the next time that they're in, or they had trouble with learning a particular tool. Any kind of notes that you want to capture about a user can be captured here. And then an active or inactive flag. So this active flag here, this user is currently set to active. If we deactivated this user, now you'll notice up at the top, we have the ability to delete this user. So inactive users will not show up on that main list. And then when we delete this user, they are permanently removed from the Grit database. However, all of the data captured around tool usage and logging in and logging out, all of that stuff is still stored within Grit. It's just no longer is that user actually active within the system. Different functionalities also can utilize SMS messages. So being able to, and storing a user's mobile number, now they're able to receive notification text messages when different things occur in the system. Notifications will be covered in another video. Next, over and above this, the profile, we have permissions. So permissions, this is set up so that we have some different sections. This first section is all about the explicit permission groups that have been set up for this within this system. The all tools permission group is just that. It's all tools, and it's a standard permission group, so only one tool can be used at a time, but this user has access to everything. For systems that have asset tracking installed, we also have an all assets permission group. Now that's every asset that's in the system, this user can check out from the asset tracking kiosk. And then crossover tools. Crossover tools is a standard permission group that gets added into a GRIT system. And this is what can interact with cloud functionality when the subscription has been set up for this particular installation. And shops can share permission groups and users. So if a user has been trained on 3D printers, for instance, at one facility, that then they can go to another facility that's also running GRIT and are on the same subscription to be able to run 3D printers at this other facility. And that's just an option that can be set up so that you can be trained at one place and use tools at another place that also is running GRIT. Now the remainder of these permission groups have been set up within the permission group section, which we'll look at in a second, and you can add this user to these groups as needed. In addition, we also have individual tools. So you can add an individual tool to a user outside of a permission group if the situation makes sense to do that. And then you can also revoke individual tools. So let's say an example is that a user has been trained on the drill press, and that drill press is part of tier 1 tools. We want to be able to revoke just one tool for that one user because they keep breaking it. You can go into GRIT, edit that user's profile, and revoke permissions to that one tool. And now it's explicitly revoked. So when they come in on another visit, they don't go and talk to someone and say, hey, I should have access to this tool, and it shows that they've not been added to that tool. You can explicitly see that they have been revoked from that tool and they need to talk to a shop manager. From the GRIT application roles, there is GRIT admin, which is a person that has access to everything, the administration, the sign-on kiosk, the asset tracking kiosk, and all reporting. But we can actually do subsets of these roles. So student workers that you don't want to have access to the admin section, you can give them access to the sign-on kiosk so that they can work a front desk at a makerspace or a shop to create new users if needed, or they've just passed an exam and you want to be able to give them permissions to this new tool. That can all happen from the front-end sign-on kiosk without requiring an administrator to come and give them permissions. The asset checkout kiosk is similar to that sign-on in that a user that has asset checkout admin, they can check out assets to users when a user comes up to like an asset desk. So they want to check out a particular tool, or they want to check out some type of media devices, anything that's being tracked by GRIT's asset system. A asset admin is required to be able to check that out to a user. This is the application role that can be set for that. And then assets, in addition to tools, also can have permissions. So if I have a particular tool that I want to ensure someone has training on how to use, and it's not a power tool that has a trigger on it, but it's one, say a hand sander or a battery operated tool that you want to make sure they're not going to go and break, like a router. You can set up assets and have those assets require a certain level of training and permissions, and only users that have those asset trainings can check them out during the checkout process. These are all the permissions that we're setting up and configuring for an individual user. In addition to having a screen here that allows you to set this stuff up, we can also import all of this permission data from learning management systems, LMSs, such as Canvas, and as well as during data import processes through CSV import. The ability to set up permissions, we also have the ability to set up access times. Access times allow you to lock down, in addition to just what tools you can access, when you can access them. So a few different use cases of when this has value. There was an incident where a student was working late at night and they got very hurt because they were alone in a shop when they had an interaction with a lathe and they got caught in the lathe. You can say, yes, this user can use the lathe, but they can't use that lathe past a certain time of day. So instead of working alone at 1 in the morning, they would not be able to use a tool, say, past 10 o'clock or whatever that time is. Now, we also can use access times for high school situations where we have individual classes and we know that these users can use these tools that they've been trained on only during their class periods. So setting up access times that correspond to those particular shop class periods. So going into one of these access times, we're able to see some of the settings that come along with this. So being able to select the exact days that this access time is applicable, but also the start time and the end time of these time periods. And then some other settings that say after that access time has elapsed, do you want to automatically sign out that user from the shop? Or during this access time, is the person allowed to work alone? Or is there, this access time, are they required to have an admin signed in to the shop at that same time? So let's say there's a situation where a student has access to the shop to use tools at this particular time, but they also have to have an admin who's also present and signed in, so that they're not just working alone or working without professional staff there available. And then finally, being able to set up, and this applies to shops that are looking to monetize either the sale of assets, so being able to sell consumables, perhaps lumber or wood or hot glue or drill bits or sandpaper. You want to be able to charge and have those users pay for these types of consumable assets. Or shop time. So how long is that user either using tools or how long is that user signed into the shop? We can then calculate how long and then apply a cost or an expense that they have to pay for that shop usage. Being able to capture that user's relevant credit card data or connection into PayPal or perhaps an invoice that gets automatically set at the end of the month. We're able to set that payment info up on a per user basis also within this user's profile. Coming back to the main list, we open our little side menu and we're going to look at permissions. So we have a few permissions here set up, and let's go into this one that's been called Big Tools. Within this set within this permission group, we are able to select a few between 3 different permission group types. Standard is a permission group type that says, of these tools, I can use any of them, but only one at a time. So as a user, I probably can't use a table saw at the same time as I'm using the jointer. Or I can't use the drill press at the same time as I'm using the planer. Usually a user is going to be using one tool at a time. Now there's scenarios where it's not one tool at a time. And we have two different setups for that. The first one is called a tool set. And this is where two tools act as one. So an example of this would be you have two router tables set up. One of them has a rail bit and one of them has a style bit. And you're using each of these router tables simultaneously. You're going to cut your rail and then you're going to go over and cut your style. You might have them both running at the same time. Those two tools we want a user to be able to log into and have them both running simultaneously. But if any other tool gets logged into by that same user, it will log you out of the previous two tools, only if they're not running. Grit will never allow you to log into another tool while the other ones are still running, unless you have a permission group set up as simultaneous usage. And this is good for experienced users that are working with tools that are CNC machines or perhaps a laser that run autonomously, like a 3D printer perhaps, that you want to be able to start a job on this tool that's going to run autonomously, and then you want to be able to go and do any one other tool. So I want to start a job on the CNC, and then I want to go and be able to continue and work with other tools in the shop while that job is running. You would put the CNC into the simultaneous usage category, and then you can log into the CNC, start a job, and then go and use any other one tool in the shop. Next to this, we have this show on sign-on screen. This setting controls whether or not this permission group shows up on the sign-on kiosk screen so that student workers can assign this permission group to users from that front-end kiosk screen, instead of having to go into the admin section to assign a user permissions. If there are permission groups that are for tools that you want to ensure that no one else can get access to, other than someone who has an admin rights, you can say no to this setting and it can't be assigned from the sign-on screen. Flipping back to standard, you'll see that we have a tab here that says tools and it says assets. A permission group can be set up such that you can add tools to that permission group and you can add assets to that permission group. An asset could be a hand palm sander. It could be a hand drill, battery operated, one that's being managed through an asset kiosk. You can have this permission group also encompass those assets. And then there's some arrows, there's some warning arrows, and this is just showing us within the configuration of Grit, there's something that's not quite right, so it has to be addressed. And in this instance, it says that this RFID, this particular Grit device, has not been set up and associated with a trigger yet. And that's why it does not allow you to assign it in this permission group. And then next we have all of the currently selected items, be it tools or assets, that are now part of this permission group. So you can save, and now this permission group is set up. If you alter it, anyone that's in this permission group now has those altered permissions. Job codes. Job codes can be set up so that when a user is signing into the system, they can sign in under a particular job code, so that you can track the amount of time that someone is spending on a particular project. This is useful if you wanted to track time for a user that's working on a commercial project and it's billed hourly, or if you want to track your actuals versus estimates. Job codes allow you to do that, and when users sign into the system, they're going to sign in under a particular job code. Integrations. Grit has many different integration possibilities, from the Grit mobile cards, so that you can use your phone to actually sign in to a Grit kiosk, to being able to interact with user profiles that are stored within a Google Sheets, or an automated CSV import, or integrations with some other external system functionalities. And then finally, we're back to where we are at the settings, the main settings, and these are the grit track settings, again, because we're under the main grit track button at the bottom there. And so grit allows us to turn on and off access control via RFIDs for the whole system, for the whole shop, and then subsequently turn on just a few at a time. For instance, when a new shop is going online, it's helpful to just select the certain tools that we want to enable, so the turning things on is easier. We can also require that a user be signed in, or maybe we don't require that a user is to be signed in. And that's a preference of a particular shop if they want to make someone sign in, or if they don't. Another is from a sign-on kiosk. Do we want to allow for searching for a user's name to be able to find them in the system and sign someone in? So for shops where security, we want to keep things very locked down, it's probably best to have this off. But certain makerspaces, it might be okay to allow a user to search for their own name and sign in that way if they forgot their badge that is normally how they sign in, that particular day. Mobile Grit Card allows us to configure the icons and the look and the feel of the mobile wallet card that Grit can create for your users. This allows you to set icons and images so that the mobile card is tailored to your look and feel. As time progresses, there will be more and more users in your system. Knowing when users haven't been to your shop in quite some time and automatically deactivating those users makes sure that there isn't a security vulnerability where 5 years ago someone had access to the shop and no one noticed that user is still in the system. We can automatically deactivate users that haven't been into the shop, haven't signed in, haven't done anything, and say 60 days, 90 days, whatever you want to set. And the Grit will automatically purge and deactivate those users so that they're no longer able to sign in. And then finally, at the end of the night, there might be some people that have not signed out of the system. We can automatically sign them out at a particular time, and when that happens, if you're using temporary Grit cards, most of those users will probably have a temporary Grit card with them. So we can actually set up a notification so that an admin at the end of the night receives a list of users that forgot to sign out, so there's probably an element of retraining there, as well as they probably have a temporary Grit card that they need to return. And then next to all these settings, we have demographics. Demographics allow you to slice and dice all of your different data and metrics that come out of your system by elements that make sense for your user base. For universities and institutions, that could be year in school, that could be major, that could be it could be gender. One particular shop, they were looking to increase the participation of female users within this shop class. By using Grit and a demographic of gender, specifying male, female, non-binary, any other settings that make sense for your establishment, you can look at all of the data, but group it by those particular settings. So this shop manager was able to show semester over semester, he's increased the percentage of female participation within his classes. And that goes for major and the department within a university, so that if the way funds are allocated, then you can look and see how much of the engineering department is using this shop versus the art and design students, and potentially use that to build different departments accordingly. Demographics gives you lots of power to find out even more about your users.